The rejection letter sat on my desk like a bomb that had already detonated, its fragments scattered across my future. I read it for the 20th time, my vision blurring with tears that I refused to let fall. Princeton University regretted to inform me that despite my impressive qualifications, 4.0 GPA, perfect SAT score, president of 3 clubs, volunteer work that actually meant something to me, they would not be offering me admission for the fall semester. The formal language couldn't hide what felt like a personal attack. "Mia, dinner." Dad called from downstairs, his voice carrying the same authoritative tone it always had, the one that expected immediate compliance. I wiped my eyes quickly and shoved the letter under my pillow. I couldn't face him yet, not when the devastation was still so raw. He'd pretend to be sympathetic while secretly relieved. He'd been against me applying to schools more than 30 minutes from our Connecticut home. Princeton had been my dream, far enough away to breathe, prestigious enough to open doors my father couldn't control. Coming, I called back, my voice steadier than I felt. When I entered the dining room, my father was already seated at the head of the table, serving himself from the takeout containers he'd brought home. Richard Caldwell, esteemed cardiothoracic surgeon, widower, as far as the community knew, and helicopter parent extraordinaire. "How was your day?" he asked, not looking up as he precisely arranged his food. "Fine," I lied, taking my seat and mechanically serving myself some pasta I knew I wouldn't taste. He nodded, seemingly satisfied with my non-answer. That was our relationship, surface-level conversations that never scratched at anything real. Since Mom had left 8 years ago, he'd transferred all his controlling tendencies onto me. The irony was that he barely knew me despite monitoring every aspect of my life. "I was thinking," he said between careful bites, "that UConn has an excellent pre-med program. And you could live at home, save on housing costs." I stabbed a piece of chicken with unnecessary force. "I haven't heard back from everywhere yet." "Of course," he said smoothly. "But it's good to have realistic options." I felt my jaw tighten. Princeton hadn't been unrealistic. With my credentials, it should have been a strong possibility. Something felt wrong about the rejection, but I couldn't put my finger on what. We ate in silence for a few minutes before Dad cleared his throat. "The hospital gala is this weekend. I'd like you to attend. Dr. Whitaker's son will be there. He's starting at UConn's medical school in the fall." And there it was, another attempted setup with another future doctor from another family in his social circle. My father's vision for my life was so narrow it suffocated me. Local college, medical school, marriage to someone he approved of, practice at his hospital. A life mapped out without my input. "I have a lot of studying to do," I said, knowing it was futile. "It's important to network, Mia. These connections will serve you well in your career." "What if I don't want your career?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. Dad set down his fork with the precise control that always preceded his most controlled anger. "We've discussed this. Your aptitude tests show that I'd make a good doctor. They also show I'd make a good lawyer, writer, or anthropologist. Those aren't stable careers. They're careers people actually choose for themselves," I countered, feeling reckless. The Princeton rejection had stripped away my usual caution. Dad's eyes narrowed. "Like your mother chose? Running off to chase some artistic fantasy?" The mention of my mother, a topic usually strictly forbidden, stunned me into silence. Catherine Caldwell, brilliant architect who'd apparently abandoned her successful career and her family to pursue painting in Europe. At least, that was my father's version. We never spoke of her. "I'm not her," I said quietly. "No, you're not. You're smarter than that. You won't throw away everything for some childish dream." I pushed my plate away, appetite completely gone. "May I be excused?" He nodded curtly, already reaching for his phone to check emails. I escaped upstairs, anger and disappointment churning in my stomach. Back in my room, I pulled out the Princeton letter again. Something nagged at me, beyond the rejection itself. The phrasing seemed odd. "While your academic achievements meet our standards, we have concerns about your fit with Princeton's independent campus culture." What concerns? My application essays had emphasized my independence and self-direction. It made no sense. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend, Zoe. "Any news from Princeton?" I typed back. Asterisk rejected. Makes no sense, asterisk. Her response was immediate. Asterisk what? That's impossible. You were a guaranteed admit, asterisk. Apparently not. Asterisk this feels wrong. Can we appeal, asterisk? I hadn't considered that possibility. On what grounds? Asterisk ick. But something's fishy. No way you got rejected legitimately, asterisk. The idea settled in my mind, taking root. What if something had interfered with my application? But what? And who would do that? A cold feeling spread through my chest as I remembered my father's relief when I mentioned not hearing from everywhere yet. He'd seemed so certain I'd be going to UConn. Almost as if he knew Princeton wasn't happening. No, that was paranoid thinking. My father was controlling, but he wouldn't actively sabotage me, would he? I tried to dismiss the thought, but it kept returning as I prepared for bed. My father had connections everywhere. He sat on boards. He donated to institutions. He called in favors without hesitation when it served his purposes. Had Princeton been another calculated move in the chess game he played with my life? Sleep came fitfully, and I woke the next morning with the questions still burning in my mind. Over breakfast, I watched my father skim the newspaper while answering emails on his phone. Dad, I said carefully, did you ever meet anyone from Princeton's admissions office? His hand paused almost imperceptibly before turning the page. Why would I? Just wondering. You know so many people. I believe I met someone at a fundraiser once. Years ago. He didn't meet my eyes. What about recently? Did you talk to anyone about my application? Now he looked up, his expression guarded. What's this about, Mia? My rejection letter had some strange wording. It mentioned concerns about my fit with their independent culture. It doesn't make sense. College admissions are competitive. You can't take it personally. I'm not. I'm just curious why they'd say that specifically. He checked his watch. I need to get to the hospital. We can discuss your college options this weekend. Remember, the gala is at 7. And just like that, he was gone, leaving my suspicions to fester. I should have left for school, but instead, I found myself standing outside my father's home office. I'd never invaded his privacy before, both out of respect and fear of consequences. But the need to know outweighed my hesitation. The door was locked as expected, but I knew where he kept the spare key taped under the drawer of the hallway console table. My hands trembled as I retrieved it and unlocked the door. His office was immaculate, like everything else in his life. I went straight to his desk, unsure what I was even looking for. His computer was password protected, and I had no hope of guessing it. I tried the drawers instead, finding most locked except one containing ordinary supplies. I was about to give up when I noticed his planner on the desk. He still kept a physical appointment book despite having everything on his phone, a habit from his early career. I flipped through the pages, scanning for any mention of Princeton. 3 months ago, there it was. Maxwell, Princeton ADM, 7 p.m. A dinner meeting with someone from Princeton admissions. My heart raced. It wasn't proof, but it was something. I took a photo of the page with my phone and continued searching. The sound of the front door opening froze me in place. Dad never came home mid-morning. I quickly replaced the planner, rushed out of the office, locked it, and had just returned the key to its hiding place when a woman's voice called out. Hello? Is anyone home? It wasn't our housekeeper's day. The voice sounded vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. Cautiously, I moved toward the foyer. The woman standing there took my breath away. Older than in my memories, with streaks of silver in her dark hair, but unmistakable. The same green eyes that looked back at me from the mirror every day. Mom? The word felt foreign on my tongue. Catherine Caldwell smiled tentatively. Mia, look at you. Her eyes filled with tears. You're all grown up. I stood frozen, unable to process her presence. 8 years of silence, and now she was standing in our foyer as if she'd just stepped out for a moment. What are you doing here? I finally managed. I needed to see you. To talk to you. She hesitated. Is your father home? No. He's at work. Relief crossed her face. Good. Can we talk? I promise I'll explain everything. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to demand where she'd been for 8 years. Another part, a part I'd thought long dead, wanted to run into her arms. I did neither. We can sit in the living room, I said stiffly. She followed me, taking in the house. He hasn't changed anything, she murmured. Why are you here now? I asked once we were seated, keeping as much distance between us as possible. She took a deep breath. I received a call from an old colleague, Jason Maxwell, who works in Princeton's admissions office. My heart stopped at the name from Dad's planner. He was troubled by a situation and reached out because he remembered we were friends. He told me your father had contacted him about your application. What do you mean contacted him? Her expression hardened. Your father offered to make a substantial donation to the university's cardiac research center with the condition that your application be rejected. The world tilted beneath me. That's not possible. He wouldn't. Jason was uncomfortable with the arrangement, but felt pressured. Your father implied he could influence hospital affiliations that Princeton Medical Center relies on. But Jason's conscience has been bothering him. When he found out I was your mother, he called me. I felt sick. Why would Dad do that? To keep you close. To maintain control. Her face softened. Mia, there's so much you don't know. So much he's kept from you. Like what? Like the real reason I left. She leaned forward. I didn't abandon you to chase artistic fantasies, as I'm sure he told you. I left because your father had become dangerously controlling. He monitored my calls, controlled our finances completely, isolated me from friends and family. When I tried to leave with you, he threatened to use his connections to have me declared an unfit mother. He said I'd never see you again. My mind reeled, trying to reconcile this with the father I knew. But wasn't this exactly what I'd suspected him capable of this morning? Why didn't you fight for me? Why didn't you contact me all these years? Pain flashed across her face. I tried. Every letter was returned. Every call blocked. He got a restraining order based on false allegations. I was fighting a battle against someone with endless resources and connections. But I never stopped trying, Mia. I hired private investigators to check on you. I sent cards through different addresses. Did you ever receive any? I shook my head, a hollowness expanding in my chest. He said you wanted a new life without us. No, Mia. I wanted a safe life with you. I've spent 8 years building a career, saving money, and gathering evidence of your father's manipulative behavior. When Jason called, I knew it was time to come back. This is too far, actively sabotaging your future to keep you under his thumb. I thought about the prison my life had become, the approved activities, the monitored friendships, the predetermined path. It had all felt normal until this moment. What happens now? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. That depends on you. I can help you appeal to Princeton, with Jason's support explaining what happened. I can pay for your education. I've been saving for this since I left. You don't need your father's money. She paused. And if you want, you could come live with me in Boston. I have a home there now. But it's your choice, Mia. I won't force you into anything. The irony wasn't lost on me, her offering freedom while my father schemed to deny it. But could I trust her? She was essentially a stranger after 8 years. I need time to think, I said finally. Of course. She reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. My number. And here, she handed me a small package. Photos, letters I wrote you, documents that corroborate what I've told you. In case you have doubts. As I took the package, the front door opened again. My father's voice called out, Mia? Why aren't you at school? My secretary said you never showed up for your excused absence meeting. A moment later, he appeared in the living room doorway. He froze when he saw my mother, his face draining of color before flushing with anger. What the hell are you doing in my house? There's a restraining order, which expired 3 years ago, my mother finished calmly. I didn't renew it since it was based on falsehoods. Mia, go to your room, he ordered without looking at me. For the first time in my life, I didn't comply. No, Dad. I think I need to be part of this conversation. His eyes snapped to mine, shock evident. I said go to your room. Now. I know about Princeton, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I know you bribed them to reject me. His expression flickered between denial and calculation. Whatever she's told you. Jason Maxwell called me, my mother interrupted. He told me everything, Richard. How you threatened his hospital's affiliations. How you demanded they reject Mia despite her qualifications. I was protecting her, he exploded. She's not ready for a school like Princeton. She's too fragile, too sheltered. Because you've kept her that way, my mother shot back. I found my voice again. Is it true? Did you bribe Princeton to reject me? His silence was answer enough. Why? I pressed. Why would you do that to me? You don't understand what the world is like, Mia. Your mother abandoned us. I've had to protect you on my own. You need guidance, structure. I need to live my own life, I countered. You've been controlling everything, my friends, my activities, my future career. And now my college choice. I know what's best for you. No, Dad. You know what's easiest for you. The realization crystallized as I spoke it. This isn't about protecting me. It's about keeping me dependent on you. He turned to my mother, ignoring my words. You show up after 8 years and think you can turn her against me? Where were you when she had pneumonia at 12? Where were you for her first heartbreak? Her sweet 16? You abandoned her. Because you gave me no choice. My mother's composure cracked. You threatened to destroy me if I tried to take her, and you made sure I couldn't be part of her life even from a distance. Every card returned. Every call blocked. You were unstable. You still are if you think anyone will believe these delusions. I looked between them, seeing the dynamic clearly for the first time. My father, so practiced at manipulation that it came as naturally as breathing. My mother, carrying 8 years of pain and determination. I found your appointment with Maxwell in your planner, I said quietly. I saw it before Mom even arrived. And now I know why my rejection letter mentioned concerns about independence that made no sense. You've been lying to me, Dad. About everything. His face hardened. You went through my private things? This is exactly why you're not ready for independence. You don't understand boundaries. The irony of him speaking about boundaries was not lost on me. Boundaries? You're lecturing me about boundaries after manipulating my entire future behind my back. I am your father, and that gives you the right to control every aspect of my life? I was shouting now, years of suppressed rebellion finally breaking free. To decide where I go to college? Who my friends are? What career I pursue? Yes, he shouted back. That's what parenting is. No, Richard, my mother said quietly. That's what control is. And it's why I had to leave. His attention snapped back to her. You left because you were selfish. You wanted your freedom more than you wanted your daughter. Something inside me broke hearing him say that, the same narrative he'd fed me for years suddenly sounding hollow. Is that true? I asked my mother directly. She met my eyes steadily. I tried to take you with me, Mia. He threatened to use his connections to have me declared unfit. He had colleagues willing to testify that I was mentally unstable. I had no money of my own. He controlled all our accounts. No family nearby to help. I made the hardest choice of my life. I left to build a case, to create a safe place for when you were older, when you could choose for yourself. Convenient story, my father spat. Tell me, Catherine, if you cared so much, why wait until now? She's been alive for 18 years. I've been trying for 8 years. You blocked me at every turn. But now she's 18. Legally an adult. And you've finally overplayed your hand with this Princeton scheme. I looked down at the package in my hands. I want to see what's in here. Whatever it is, it's manipulated, my father said quickly. She's trying to turn you against me. Like you turned me against her? I countered. I think I need to judge for myself. I opened the package with trembling hands. Inside were photographs of a younger me with my mother, images I'd never seen before. Birthday cards with returned postmarks. Legal documents showing my father's restraining order and my mother's attempts to contest it. Financial records of a savings account labeled Mia's College Fund, with regular deposits spanning 8 years. And most damning, printouts of emails between my father and various psychologists discussing my mother's instability and requesting evaluations without ever having her as a patient. You fabricated mental health issues to keep her away from me? I looked up at my father in horror. His face was tight with anger. You don't understand what she was like. The mood swings, The impulsivity. I was protecting you. My mother laughed bitterly. My mood swings were responses to your control, Richard. My impulsivity was any decision made without your approval. Something shifted in my perception as pieces fell into place. My father's insistence that I was delicate and needed guidance, his subtle undermining of my confidence, his constant monitoring disguised as concern. The same tactics he'd apparently used on my mother. I want to appeal to Princeton, I said suddenly. With the truth. My father's eyes widened. Mia, be reasonable. This would create a scandal. My reputation. Your reputation? I repeated incredulously. What about my future? The future you tried to steal from me? I was securing your future. A proper path, not some foolish liberal arts fantasy that would leave you unemployable and lost like your mother. My mother stepped forward. I'm an award-winning architect with my own firm, Richard. Hardly unemployable. Just not under your control. I looked at her with new eyes. You're an architect? She nodded. I returned to it after I left. Built my career back piece by piece. Another lie exposed. My father had always described her as a failed artist chasing pipe dreams. I want to see your work, I said to her, then turned to my father. And I want the truth from you. All of it. No more manipulation. This is ridiculous, he blustered. She shows up after 8 years and you're ready to believe everything she says? I found your appointment with Maxwell before she ever arrived. And these documents. I held up the emails. Did you forge these? Are these your signatures on these affidavits? His silence was damning. I'm 18 now, I continued. You can't legally stop me from leaving, from applying to colleges, from speaking to Princeton about what you did. If you do this, you're on your own, he threatened. Not a penny for college, for living expenses, for anything. My mother stepped in. No, she's not on her own. She has me. And 8 years of college savings, plus my income. She doesn't need your money, Richard. That's what terrifies you, isn't it? That without financial control, you have nothing. The truth of her words hung in the air. My father's face contorted with the realization that his leverage was slipping away. This is temporary insanity, he said dismissively. You'll come to your senses, Mia. And when she disappoints you, because she will, don't expect me to be waiting with open arms. Even now, he was trying to plant seeds of doubt. But the spell was broken. I'd like you to leave, I said quietly. I need time to think. Both of you. My mother nodded immediately. Of course. Call me when you're ready to talk more. She moved toward the door, then paused. Regardless of what you decide, Mia, know that I've loved you every day for 18 years. That never stopped. My father didn't budge. This is my house. I'm not going anywhere. Then I will, I said, grabbing my phone and keys. I'll be at Zoe's. He moved to block the doorway. You're making a huge mistake. The mistake was trusting you, I replied, my voice breaking. Please move. For a tense moment, I thought he might refuse. Then, something in his expression changed, perhaps the realization that physical prevention would only prove my mother's points about his controlling nature. This conversation isn't over, he said, stepping aside. No, it's not, I agreed. But it continues on my terms now. I left with my mother, the package of evidence clutched tightly in my hands. Outside, the spring air felt different somehow, cleaner, full of possibility. I have a hotel room in town, my mother said. I can drive you to your friend's house, or you're welcome to come with me. No pressure either way. I studied her face, searching for signs of the manipulation I'd grown so accustomed to with my father. I found only patience and a hope she was trying to keep contained. I'd like to hear more, I decided. About your life. About what really happened. The relief on her face was palpable. I'd like that too. We drove in silence for a few minutes before I asked, can we really get Princeton to reconsider? Jason says yes. With his testimony about what happened and your stellar application, they'll almost certainly reverse the decision. But Mia. She glanced at me. If Princeton isn't what you want, that's okay too. This is about you having choices, not about trading one predetermined path for another. The concept was so foreign it made me dizzy. Choices. Real ones, not the illusion of choice within carefully controlled parameters. I don't even know what I want, I admitted. I've never been allowed to figure it out. She nodded in understanding. That's the first thing to reclaim then. The right to discover who you are without anyone else's expectations defining you. At the hotel, we talked for hours. She showed me photos of her architectural designs, told me about her struggles and triumphs after leaving. I learned that she'd remarried to a kind English professor, that I had a half-sister who was 6. That she'd kept a room ready for me in their Boston home, hoping someday I might occupy it. She cried when I told her about my life, the achievements, and the invisible chains. She didn't try to fix anything or tell me what to do next. She just listened. By evening, I'd made my decision. I called Princeton's admissions office and scheduled a meeting with the dean and Jason Maxwell. I called my father and told him I wouldn't be home that night, or perhaps for many nights to come. "You're choosing her over me?" he asked, disbelief evident in his voice. "I'm choosing myself," I corrected him. For the first time ever. He was silent for a long moment. "What do you want from me, Mia?" It was the first honest question he'd asked in years. Space. Truth. And eventually, when you're ready to see me as an autonomous person rather than an extension of yourself, maybe a relationship based on mutual respect. He didn't respond to that, but he didn't argue either. It was a start. I spent the night in the hotel's second bedroom, surrounded by the evidence of my mother's enduring love and my father's deception. It should have been the worst day of my life. Instead, it felt like the first real day, the beginning of a life reclaimed. The next morning, my mother and I went to Princeton together. Jason Maxwell met us first, his discomfort evident, but his resolve clear. He provided copies of my father's emails, documentation of the proposed donation with its manipulative conditions. The admissions dean listened gravely, apologized profusely, and assured me my application would be reconsidered on its merits alone. 2 days later, I received a new letter from Princeton, an acceptance, with a personal note from the dean expressing regret for the ethical breach and admiration for my courage in bringing it to light. My father sent a text that simply read, "We need to talk when you're ready." I didn't respond immediately. The power dynamic had shifted, and we both knew it. Any future relationship would be on new terms, ones that acknowledged my autonomy. My mother helped me set up a bank account in my name only, with a college fund she'd maintained for 8 years. She showed me her home in Boston, introduced me to her husband Paul, who welcomed me without expectation, and my wide-eyed half-sister Emma, who'd apparently heard stories about her big sister for years. Life had handed me an earthquake that destroyed the carefully constructed prison of my existence. Standing in the rubble, I found something unexpected: freedom. The path ahead was unmapped, uncertain, and entirely mine to chart. 3 months later, I moved into my dorm at Princeton. My mother and Paul helped me carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs, while Emma explored every corner with endless curiosity. My father didn't come. We were still navigating what our relationship might become. But he'd sent a card with a simple message: I was wrong. I'm sorry. I'm trying to understand. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement. It was a beginning. That evening, after my family left, I stood at the window of my dorm room, looking out at the campus that had almost been stolen from me. Students crossed the quad below, each on their own journey. For the first time in my life, I was simply one among many, not a possession, not an extension of someone else's will, just a young woman with her future stretching before her like an open road. The rejection letter that had started it all was pinned to my bulletin board, a reminder of how close I'd come to losing myself. Beside it hung the acceptance letter that represented not just admission to a prestigious university, but acceptance of my right to self-determination. Tomorrow would bring classes, new friends, challenges I couldn't anticipate. For the first time ever, I would face them as myself, not as the carefully molded creation my father had tried to shape, but as Mia, discovering who she was and who she might become. The thought was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was mine,